Hey, welcome back to Shaboom. It's Rick K. Jones, your host. We had so much to talk about with Rob Prazmark last week that, heck, we brought him back for a second round today, and we're very, very excited about that. Our theme today is rivals. Rivals. We all have rivals. We have rival schools, we have rival teams, we have rival towns, and we've had a number of those in our lifetimes. Sports rivals, political rivals, countries as rivals. Let's start with countries as rivals. We grew up as baby boomers, us versus the evil empire. It was called the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union was evil, and we were told it was evil. And everything we did was against the Soviet Union. It kind of came to a head. It started back, which I think we've talked about before, with the space race. You know, we were concerned about, when the Soviets sent up the first satellite, there was a misconception that the satellite could shoot bombs down at us and that we were all going to get blown up from a satellite passing over Kansas. That didn't turn out to be the case. But the Soviets, much like the Germans had tried to do pre-Second World War, they like to use sport as a way of showcasing their superiority. They really had professional sports that were paid by the state, where we competed against them with amateurs. Because technically, in the Olympic Games primarily, the professional Soviets were considered amateurs. Our professionals were considered professionals who were not able to play. So we often were competing against the Russians in the 50s, 60s, and 70s and into the 80s with young American amateurs competing against grown Soviet men. And the two sports that really, really kind of defined that were basketball and ice hockey. And of course, we had won every Olympic gold medal since 1936 until 1972. And in 1972, we had a team that played the Russians, the Soviets, in the championship game, and we won the game by 1 point. And we were celebrating the win, and the referee stopped the game and said, no, he had made a mistake, and they gave the Soviets the ball out of bounds again with like 4 seconds to go, and they threw a long pass, caught it, laid it in, and supposedly defeated us. And it was the first time they ever won the gold medal and the first time we had ever lost in the Olympic Games. Our team was so distraught, that 72 team, we've never gotten our silver medals. We refuse to accept our silver medals because that group thinks they won gold. And if you go back and watch the replays, they got screwed. But the real height of the Cold War was in 1980. In 1980, a couple things happened. One, and it's crazy how history tends to repeat itself because we don't teach history, but in 1980, the Soviets invaded a country called Afghanistan. And they went to Afghanistan. Right at the time of the invasion, we had the Winter Olympic Games in Lake Placid, New York. And it turned out that we had a very young, all-amateur hockey team that had to go up against the best hockey team in the world. Their team, the Russian team, was probably better than any professional team in the National Hockey League. They were invincible. They never lost. We played a game against what we call a friendly. You hear that term a lot in soccer. We played a friendly in Madison Square Garden before the Olympics started against the Russians, and we lost 12-1. We got humiliated, annihilated, and it's on to Lake Placid. Well, this is what you love about sport. If you remember the miracle on ice in the semifinal game, we beat the Russians in the hockey. And of course, we went on to beat the Finns and win the gold medal a couple of nights later. But we beat the Russians at a time that probably for the first time, you started hearing the chants USA, USA at a sporting event, and we beat the Russians. But the summer games that year were being held in Moscow. And Jimmy Carter was our president, and in protest of the Soviets invading Afghanistan, we boycotted. We did not go. I had a good friend, Bob Neiman, a very good friend, who was the captain of the Olympic team that year. He was a modern pentathlete, probably would have won the gold medal, didn't get to go. Never won a gold medal, never competed in the Olympics. And so that was a big, big rivalry. A lot of people give Ronald Reagan credit for ending the Cold War, and he deserves a lot of credit for the way he negotiated with the Soviets and primarily with Gorbachev. But Ted Turner played a big role too, because communism existed with what we call the big lie. The big lie was, it's not better over there. It's not better in West Berlin. It's a myth. They don't have stores and jobs and cars. That's just a myth. Well, CNN eliminated the myth because you couldn't keep the information out. Suddenly, everybody in Eastern Europe looked through CNN over the fence, over the wall, and said, no, it is better over there. We're going to tear down this wall. And that led to the ultimate, demise of the Soviet Union. Political rivals. We had the first presidential election that I remember was Kennedy versus Nixon, 1960. John Kennedy was a Catholic, and so many people were not going to vote for a Catholic as president of the United States, and yet he beat Nixon and became the president. Again, there were a lot of politics in that era. He picked as his running mate Lyndon Johnson because the state of Texas had so many electoral votes, and Johnson was able to deliver that, which was the difference in that. Later on, you had an interesting race. Gerald Ford, if you remember, Nixon loses to Kennedy in 60. He goes and runs for governor in California in 62, and he loses again. And he gives a famous speech called the Checkers speech, where he talks about his little dog Checkers and that you will no longer have Dick Nixon to kick around anymore. But he made a political comeback, and he won the Republican nomination again in 1968. This is in Vietnam and rejection of Democrats. And Richard Nixon won the election in 1968. He picked a guy from Maryland named Spiro Agnew to be his running mate, if you remember. And Spiro Agnew was accused of a crime and convicted and had to resign as vice president of the United States. And Nixon picked a Republican congressman named Gerald Ford. And Gerald Ford was never elected. He was elected a congressman in Michigan, but he was never elected as vice president. And then we had Watergate, and Nixon had to resign, and Gerald Ford, an unelected person, became the president of the United States. So Gerald Ford is going to run for re-election in now 1976, but he has a political rival named Ronald Reagan. And Ronald Reagan tried to win the nomination and came up just short in 1976. Gerald Ford won the nomination, went on to lose to Jimmy Carter. In my opinion, he lost to Jimmy Carter because of one state. Gerald Ford, New York was bankrupt, and Gerald Ford did not bail New York out. In fact, the quote was, Gerald Ford to New York dropped dead. New York went for Jimmy Carter. The margin of error was that thin. Carter became the president, but we know what happened to Ronald Reagan. He spent 4 years giving speeches, building a coalition, and then in 1980, he routed Jimmy Carter and then really beat Walter Mondale in 1984. And now we have Donald Trump versus the entire Democratic Party. It's funny, Donald Trump originally was a Democrat. I'm not sure he's a Republican now. I think he's a populist. But nevertheless, he is the banner carrier for the Republican Party. And the Democratic Party today, unfortunately, their platform seems to still be, we're not Trump. And that's hard to win elections on what you're not. At some point, you win elections by what you are. My generation had amazing sports rivalries. In the 1950s, The biggest rivalry in baseball were the Yankees versus the Dodgers. It seems like they met in so many World Series classics. In fact, here's a great stat. From 1950 to 1959, at least one New York team played in the World Series every year. Every year. They won all of them except for 1957, when an upstart little team from Milwaukee called the Braves won the World Championship. And later the Braves came to Atlanta and is my team of choice. You had the growth of the NFL, late 1950s, a classic overtime game that was broadcast on national television between the New York Giants, led by Frank Gifford, and the Baltimore Colts, led by John Unitas. The Colts won that game in overtime. It really established the NFL as our premier league, and they've gone on to great things since then. Early in the 60s, you had a classic rivalry between the Green Bay Packers and the Dallas Cowboys. And it seems like Dallas fell just short to the Packers each time. In the National Basketball Association, you really had, great rivalries between the Celtics and the Lakers, but it was really a personal rivalry between a guy by the name of Wilt Chamberlain and a guy by the name of Bill Russell. And Russell got the better of Wilt in most of those meetings. Later, you had the Bulls versus the Pistons, and again had Lakers, Celtics too. Great rivalries in professional sports. College sports is full of great rivalries in our lifetime. I'm biased. I think Alabama versus Auburn is the best football rivalry. Those that are Ohio State or Michigan fans will beg to differ. They'll say that their rivalry is more important and bigger than Alabama and Auburn. Again, Michigan and Ohio are border states, and so it's an important game. But these two rivals, Alabama and Auburn, are from the same state. And you have so many divided houses. People that went to one school married to someone who went to another school. A lot of people don't know this about Auburn and Alabama. They wouldn't play. Alabama would never go to Auburn. They would not play at Auburn. They played at a neutral site every year in Birmingham, which was very, very close to Tuscaloosa, in Legion Field. And because Birmingham is called the Iron City because they had a steel plant there, the name of Legion Field and the name of the game was the Iron Bowl. And they played it every year. Well, pretty soon, Auburn elected enough state legislators that they said, no, we're going to insist that you come play at Auburn or you lose all your state funding, Alabama. So Alabama took an undefeated team to Auburn. They were ranked number one in the country. Bill Curry was the coach. They went to Auburn, and Auburn beat them. Auburn beat them, and has led to the great rivalry, because rivalries don't work if one team wins all the time. You got to have the balance of both teams winning. In college basketball, again, I'm biased. There's nothing like Duke versus North Carolina. I mean, what color blue do you wear? They have had classic games from the 50s, the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, right up to now. Unbelievable games, great rivalry on Tobacco Road. They're only 8 miles apart, the two schools. And so they interact with each other all the time. But it's an interesting mix of a state, kind of a liberal school versus a private, kind of a conservative school. And so you get all that richness of the rivalry. I grew up as a tennis fan, and I was fortunate to see some great rivalries in my time. I'm still biased. My favorites was Jimmy Connors versus Bjorn Borg. Great, great rivalries. I went on my first trip abroad in 1977. I took a group of high school kids. I was a chaperone, if you can believe that. I'm 22 years old, and I'm chaperoning a bunch of kids in England. And that was the year that Queen Elizabeth was celebrating her 25th anniversary, what we call the Silver Jubilee as a queen. And a female British tennis player named Virginia Wade won Wimbledon. And it was her gift to the queen. She called it, "This is my gift to the queen." Well, that year in the finals, Connors met Borg. big rivals. They've been rivals for all the time. Borg led. He won the first 2 sets, so he leads 2 sets to none. You figure it's over. Connors wins sets 3 and 4. Set 5, the determining set, Connors falls behind 0-4. He's down 4 games to none in the 5th set. He rallies back and wins the next 4. And then ultimately he does lose the last 2 and Borg wins. But it was one of the greatest Wimbledons I ever saw, and I was there. So it was pretty neat. And later on, what was neat for me is I got to have Wimbledon as a client years later, where I sold sponsorships for Wimbledon and all that. And of course, in my generation, golf was so important, still is. And in my opinion, the greatest golf rivalry of all time was Jack Nicklaus versus Arnold Palmer. Palmer was the son of a club professional from Latrobe, Pennsylvania, played at golf at Wake Forest, kind of what you would call a blue-collar golfer, hitched his pants, took chances, charismatic, everybody loved him. Jack went to Ohio State for a few years, had won the U.S. Amateur a number of times. At that era, Jack was a little overweight, and so it was kind of fat Jack versus Arnie's Army. But of course, Nicklaus won more majors than anybody else. He and Palmer were great rivals, but they were great friends too. Welcome back to part 2. I'm glad to have you today.
Great to be here, Rick. Thank you.
Well, we left off last time beginning to talk about Visa and American Express. And, you know, you did probably the most unusual contract ever. It was a pioneered contract. You know, Coke couldn't say, and the Olympics don't take Pepsi, or, you know, General Motors couldn't say, you know, they don't take Ford, but you got an agreement for an ad campaign that basically said, you better bring your Visa card to Calgary because there's a lot of fun things to do, and the Olympics don't take American Express.
You know, I got to tell you, that was, you know, one moment in time. And the rivalry between, remember, American Express was the big gorilla. I mean, they were even mightier than Google. I mean, and they had an ego bigger than Google. And so, and Visa was a number 3 brand. And they were just breaking out this campaign that said, hey, if you go to this little fishing store or go to this little restaurant called Rosalie's, you better bring your Visa card because they don't take American Express. So it was the right time, right place where, you know, we pitched some very big visionaries, John Bennett and Jan Soderstrom, and said, hey, listen, we want you to be an Olympic sponsor. And they went, okay, great, but we've got this new campaign coming out. And we said, well, we're going to make you the preferred card. And they go, no, you know, we don't want to be the preferred card. We want to be the only card. So I'm going to make this story short. Seoul, Korea was not a problem because they didn't even know what a credit card was. So it was fine. You know, we'll take it. Calgary was an issue because Calgary had restaurants in place. They had merchandise in place, and they had ticketing in place. And so I ran up against a lot of resistance because the organizing committee said, no, this is going to cost us money because we are not going to be able to sell tickets to all Canadians. We had to do an independent study that showed that 80% of Canadians owned a Visa card. So it was not going to be a deterrent. Then we had one restaurant holdout in the Saddle Dome. I don't know if you remember the Saddle Dome.
Oh, yeah.
The Saddle Dome.
Yeah.
And,
yes.
And the guy goes, I ain't doing this, man, because it's going to cost me business. So we had to write in the Visa contract that if somebody walked in and they did not have a Visa card, and they did not have cash, and they did not have a traveler's check, okay, that the restaurant would actually, or the IOC would actually pay for that meal. I mean, that's how in the weeds we got.
Well, it got to be really interesting in watching the battle. I remember going to the IEG conference, the conference that Lisa Uchtman
Yeah,
ran
yeah,
in Chicago, and she had a coup. She had a panel discussion with John Bennett and Jerry Welsh. And I'll never forget, John Bennett got up and he opened the Bible. And he started by saying, you do realize God is a baseball fan, right? Because the first verse of the Bible says, in the big inning. And everybody laughed. And he said, but I want to point out another verse of scripture that's very important today. And he goes to the 10 Commandments and goes, thou shalt not steal.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, when Welsh got up, Welsh goes, I'm a marketer and this ain't church.
Yeah.
But one of the byproducts was because of that campaign, I really believe you didn't intend to do this, but you really invented ambush marketing. I mean, clearly, because American Express mounted an enormous campaign
They did.
against Visa. Talk a little bit about that.
Well, you're right. I mean, once, and let me go back to Jerry Welch. The reason why that I was so nasty against them is the fact that I never took a meeting with Jerry Welch. He would never see me. Or Jim Robinson. I mean, they just dissed me like I was.
Well, interesting, Rob. Jim Robinson went to his grave saying the biggest mistake he ever made professionally was allowing Visa into the Olympic
Yeah,
game.
I heard that. I heard that. And so, and Jerry, I think is still with us, but I've never met the man. And so, but I hear great things about the guy. I mean, he was an innovator. I mean, he hands across America. He really did create cause-related marketing. I mean, he did some.
They did the Statue of Liberty renovation that was
Yes, yes.
very
I mean, he did
successful.
some
Yeah.
great stuff, and he was an innovator, but he just would never take a meeting from me or the IOC in that case. But your question was more of
Ambush and what
ambush.
they did. Yeah.
So what happened was when that first ad came out of Visa, which was the Olympics don't take American Express, and it was in Calgary. Um, initially American Express blew it off like who the cares? No one's going to care. But the research came back, and they thought 60% of the cardholders thought the entire city of Calgary did not take American Express. So they went on the offensive. They said, "Hey, listen, we got to get back into this game," and so they started doing their own commercials and made them. I mean, they were within the rules. I mean, they didn't use the rings, they didn't use the word Olympic, and they went out of their way. They spent more money making them look like an Olympic sponsor than if they would have bought my program, okay, and bought airtime. But they were on, and then what happened was the um, consumer preference switched. So Visa then became climbing, number three, number two, and then now I mean they're a behemoth. And now I can't even get to them. I mean they don't give a shit about who I was. They don't care.
No, it's interesting. People forget they were Bank of America,
Yes, they were.
and they were even, like you said, third I think maybe Diners was bigger than,
Diners
and
was pretty close.
yeah, and
Diners
then
was a little bit,
Master Charge
yeah.
was the yeah, and
But it was MasterCard and MasterCharge and Bank Americard were kind of two and three. I mean, they were kind of cousins,
yeah.
and so they would compete friendly in the area, and so when the Olympic thing came up, I don't think Mastercard was even in the discussion. I mean, when I went to pitch Master Charge, and in those days, remember we had slide projectors, okay, and the big decision was, do you bring your own slide projector or do you think they have one? Okay, so we thought, God, Master Charge has got to have one. They're on Seventh Avenue and Manhattan.
777 Seventh Avenue. Yep.
Absolutely. And so we went in there and they didn't have one. Okay. So they were flipping through a brochure and showing them slides, and it was a mess. And the woman, Judy Black, Black was the last name, and she had just come over from American Express. So we thought that would be a pretty good instigator. But no, she just, in one ear and out the other.
It's interesting. Later on, MasterCard was my client. They got involved with the World Cup, but now Visa has the World Cup too. They have the Olympics and
Yep.
the World Cup,
Yep.
so
Yep.
it's pretty crazy. All right, let's pivot. Probably the most charismatic owner in the NFL ever is Jerry Jones. You get a call from Jerry Jones, and Jerry Jones had made the decision to basically take on the NFL. He's an NFL owner, but talk about that. This is a fabulous story.
Well, I'm of course a Buffalo Bill fan, and so Jerry had the Cowboys had beaten the Bills for we had lost 4 times in a row, and they had beaten us last twice, and so
The last one was in Atlanta, I think, and it kind of got
and we
got to
thought
be a rout.
I
Yeah.
thought we had it, and we didn't, and so I'm on the road. Remember in those days we didn't have cell phones. You had to go and hit those little dial things and whatever on AT&T phones. And my assistant says Jerry Jones called you, and I went, "You're out of your tree, okay?" And I'm thinking, two people you and I both know, Chris Welton and Mark Lewis, are pranking me because they knew I was a big Bills fan. And I go, throw the message away. So a week later, same Monday, my assistant, Eugenia was her name, said, "Hey, this Jerry Jones guy is on the phone and he sounds pretty persistent." I said, "Throw the message away." Okay. Okay. So the third week, I go, "Give me that freaking number." And so it was a 214 area code, which of course is Dallas, right? Or what it used to be. And so I dial it, and I'm going, I'm stupid me. I dial it up, Jerry Jones' office, okay? And I'm going, man, Welton and Lewis went way beyond this. I mean, I can't believe it. So the assistant answers. I said, "Listen, my name's Rob Prazmark," and I said, "I understand that Mr. Jones is trying to reach me, and I'm on the line, and I'm sorry to bother you, thinking it's a screw up." And I'm on hold for like 20 minutes, and she comes back. She goes, "Mr. Jones has to get back to you." I go, "Yeah, right. Okay." So I just throw the message away. I said, "If Mr. Jones wants to talk to me, call me next Monday at 10 o'clock." Okay. And I just forget about it. I figure this is Welton and Lewis that got me. And so Monday at 10 o'clock, Eugenia comes in and she goes, that Jerry Jones guy's on the phone. And I go, holy shit. Okay, excuse me. Sorry. I know it's a family show. And so I pick up the phone, and there is Mr. He used to call him Mr. Crazy Mark. Crazy Mark, this is Jerry Jones, owner and general manager of the world champion Dallas Cowboys. How are you today? And I'm kind of going, really? Okay. So I call my staff in to just listen to this call. And so he kind of goes into it, the fact that he's sick and tired. He was selling 33% of all the merchandise at the NFL, um, and he was the strongest market, and probably even now at the time, and he was sick and tired of only getting one 29th, because I think there were only 29 teams in those days, 29th of the revenue. And we were going to, he says, I want to create a program to take on the NFL properties. And I said, Jerry, you're taking on the devil, man. I mean, this is not, they're not going to take this lightly. So he hired us for, pretty good amount of money to create a program around, remember the stadium used to be Texas Stadium, and it had the big hole and whatever. And he goes,
You know why it had the hole? So
no,
God could watch the Cowboys.
I believe
I'm I'm not making that up. All the fans were covered. I mean, if it was bad weather, it was fine. But there was the hole in Irving, yeah, at Texas Stadium. But that was the line, because God wants to watch the Cowboys.
I think he told me that at some point. So he says, so let's play within the rules. We've got Texas Stadium. We've got the players, Aikman and Dion and Smith, and we've got the colors. Although we can't use the star, let's create a program to go to the market. So we created this Texas Stadium program, and I got to tell you, we went the kind of antichrist. So I think they had NFL had Coke, we went Pepsi. NFL had something, we went Nike, and NFL had or Visa, we went American Express. So we were poking them hard, and so
Yeah, you were going with the number one competitor of official NFL sponsors. I mean, you were more than poking them.
we, we were successful.
Yeah, oh yeah.
And so I remember getting he would always send a jet, okay, and that's a kind of like a very cool thing. And so I remember meeting him at a league meeting, and a young Roger Goodell was watching the interaction between Jerry and I. And I had no idea who Roger Goodell was. I think it was an attorney at the time. And we were hurting them. And then the NFL sued Jerry for 400. Jerry sued them for 700 million. And so they somehow solved it. But that was it. And then I had to sue Jerry to get some additional commission out of the American Express deal, which is a scary thought, Rick, when you serve Jerry Jones legal papers on the practice field saying you're suing them. But it was only for $1 million. So anyway.
Well, it was interesting that he did take on the NFL. I have my only NFL story. I was privileged to be hired to do the cause marketing campaign for the World War II Memorial in Washington, D.C.
Okay.
And so Fred Smith was my boss, and Bob Dole. Those were the co-chairs of the program. And I had a chance to go with Fred Smith to the NFL owners meeting. And again, Fred was at that time there was a lot of talk that he might become an NFL owner. That he did a pretty significant sponsorship with FedEx with
Right.
then the Washington Redskins, now the Commanders. So I get to go with Fred to pitch the NFL owners, and he gets up and makes an impassioned speech about the campaign and the need to build this memorial for the World War II veterans before they're all gone. And then he turns to me and says, "Rick, get up here and tell these men what we came for." So I get to go up and go, "Gentlemen, we want three things. Number one, we have a tremendous PSA done by Tom Hanks called It's Time to Say Thank You. We'd like you to run that in your stadiums. Number two, on Veterans Day weekend, we'd like you to do a pass the hat or pass the helmet in your stadium to raise money, and we would like $1 million."
Okay.
Paul Tagliabue later told me, he said, "Rick, it's the only thing we voted on that weekend that all the owners voted unanimously for," because he said it was the only thing Al Davis voted in favor of. But it was pretty interesting because when I got finished, the late Wellington Mayer stood up and said, "I served in D Company in Europe in 1944 and 45, and I make a motion we give these men what they came for."
Wow.
And then Bud Adams, who owned the Houston Oilers and later the Tennessee Titans, he got up and said, "I was on the USS something in the South Pacific in 1945, and I second the motion," which was pretty cool.
Very cool.
Yeah, which was a pretty neat thing. So when you were at ISL, and maybe it was because Horst was involved with both the Olympics and the World Cup, y'all had the representation rights to both of those
We did.
global properties. Talk about the competition between FIFA and the IOC. I guess FIFA had Havelange and the IOC had Juan Antonio Samaranch. You had two very powerful leaders. Was there conflicts at ISL? Was there conflicts between the World Cup and the Olympics during that era?
There was a third property, the IAAF, which was Primo de Viola, who ran that. He was another,
Track and field, right? Global track and field, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
So I never felt it, Rick, in the States because America never got the World Cup. I mean, they really never got IAAF. And so I was really out there in my bag. I had all three. I mean, think of that. You could walk in, knock on a door, set up a meeting. And I was always trying because, I go back to my ABC days where you're always selling, across news and entertainment and sports. I was always trying to sell Olympics, World Cup, and track and field. No one gave a damn about World Cup or track and field. They only want to talk about the Olympics. So I never felt a challenge from World Cup or IAAF. I remember trying to explain people what the World Cup was. I mean, they just did. I mean, you're going back to the early '90s. They had no clue what the World Cup was, this country is now waking up to what the World Cup is. It's going to be a monster, a monster. And I'm not quite sure about the Club World Cup, which is unfortunate. It should have followed.
Yeah, I was going to say they made a mistake. If it would have been in 27 instead of 25, I think it would be a huge hit because I think people would see what's going to happen in 26. But they didn't ask either one of us.
And somebody told me the fact that MLS is nice. I mean, they even said it's cute, but it's kind of a family event where the clubs are passionate. I mean, if you're Man U, oh my God. I mean, or Man City or Barcelona. So anyway, I think hit it wrong in terms of the timing. You and I are on the same page on that one. But when the World Cup hits here, and I don't know if you saw any of Trump's speeches over the weekend, he's promoting the heck out of the World Cup. Okay. And he did have a big involvement with getting the World Cup here. Not so much the Olympic Games, but he's taking credit for it. But whatever. And we still got years to go for the Olympic Games. I think the World Cup's going to be a monster.
I do too. You know, we don't our GDP, international tourism is a fraction of what it is like in places like Italy or England or other places. We got a real window here.
Yeah.
The combination of the World Cup, our 250th birthday, and the Olympic Games in 28. The sad thing though is, and we've both spent a lot of time selling and working internationally. There's a lot of people that think you come to America and get shot in the head. I'm being candid about that. I mean, there's just that fear because of gun violence and some of that kind of stuff that does go on, that permeates, that doesn't happen in a lot of other places in the world. But we do have this unique window right now to try to attract more international tourism. I think Trump sees that as a real advantage for us. And then the side is international investment in America. We for years have gone the other way. American investment abroad. I think he's looking for more investment from foreign countries that come in here. And I don't think he wants it to be they're going to come in here and buy stuff like the Chinese have done. He wants it to be a true investment and a true partnership that benefits American manufacturing and American businesses and those kind of things. So it's going to be interesting. Rob, I've told people this. I think I'm a pretty good sales guy. I worked with a guy named Harlan Stone that was a great sales guy. You're the best sales guy I ever knew, without any question. And I think part of it was, you got to be fearless to be a salesperson, and you got to just let the losses kind of just roll off your back. You almost got to just move on. And some people can't take that kind of rejection. And I think about the American Express story where you knew that it was right for American Express. They had been the card in Los Angeles. You knew that we were heading to a global economy. American Express really didn't have that much distribution globally. And yet they rejected you, but you got the last laugh with Visa.
I thought about this a lot since our last interview. A couple things. One is we are in the rejection business. I mean, it is tough. It is tough to take 50 no's, or people nowadays just ghosting you. I just hate being ghosted. Even when I get emails that I have no interest in it, I always respond. No, thank you. No, thank you. Because I think that's a polite thing to do. Or the
Mike Reichman, who's working with me, who was at Team Impact, Team Epic and Velocity and some other agencies. He said he's writing a book right now, and it's called Ghost Stories, because everybody ghosts you today.
Yeah, everybody ghosts today, and it's so sad, so sad. I sit back and think, what? I was lucky. Okay, I got a job that nobody wanted, which is representing the Olympics. Give me a break, in 1985. And what made what we did, I just want to say me, successful. And, coming from ABC TV, there was a lot of technology. And so when we went in for presentations for the IOC, normally it was even a slide deck. It was a couple pieces of paper.
Remember transparencies that we would put on overhead projectors?
Yes. And so somehow I got ISL, which I always call International Sleaze and Lust. They fronted me a bunch of, 6 figures to put together these high-end graphic presentations on Laserdisc, and it was I was using technology from ABC Sports and whatever, and I thought that got it elevated our offering to corporations. The other thing I got IOC to do, or ISL to do research. They had no research. And so, and if they didn't have research, I made it up. Okay. And so research was a big thing. So I think that my early success was because we had this technology that no one had ever seen before in these presentations other than acetates. I think that's the word you're looking for, acetates, and and no research. And we walked in and said, here's a case study here, here's a case study here, and here's a case study here. And that's why we were successful. Nowadays, you can't do that because you got PowerPoint and all this other kind of crap.
Well, it's interesting. We talked about this a little bit last time, but we were fortunate to come along at a time when there were some risk takers in business. I try to remind people, even today, I guess, I'll say two things. Number one, it's not your money. And don't you want to leave a legacy? Or do you want to be the guy that just hit in the cube and didn't return any phone calls for 40 years? I mean, don't you want to be great? I wrote a book a few years ago called Analog Advice in a Digital World. And the first chapter of that book is still my favorite. It says, remember, mediocrity is excellence to the mediocre. And there's just seems to be a lot of mediocrity out there. I can't remember a television ad recently that I went, even though you talked to, you talked to me before about the America 250 thing that you did, and trying to go to Jeep. Jeep's been running a really good, effective ad.
They have.
About Americana and the car that built America, helped America win world wars, all that kind of stuff. And the ad they did with Harrison Ford, where he drives the Jeep and says, "I love the Jeep, even though my name is Ford."
Yeah, I love that. I love that. Yeah,
but there are not many of those. And we both grew up in an era where there were some great ads.
yeah.
The Think Small ad for Volkswagen, or Bartles and James, and Morning It Again in America. I mean, there just were so many great ads. There's not so many things. So what's next for you? You're a baby boomer. You got one more big game left in you. What is it going to be?
Thanks, Rick, for asking. I'd say to people, there are two things that are worse in the world. One is to be an empty nester and a former somebody. Okay, those things don't.
Didn't you? Yeah. Didn't you used to be? Yeah.
I remember you, but I mean, you know this. I mean, the book is pretty good, but it brings out all sorts of weird cats and dogs. I'm working with Nexstar, which is this big media company.
Yeah. They're the NBC affiliate here in Charleston.
Yeah, I mean, they're a monster, and nobody's ever heard of them. Okay, and so we're trying to put together some programming, and I've got one more, like Harrison Ford, One Last Crusade. And I thought I was going to be America 250. I mean, that was going to be, I was going to hang the hat up, and after that, and that all imploded because, anyway.
All the politics.
Yeah, all the politics. And so I would, One Last Crusade, I'm not quite sure it's an Olympic crusade. Okay. You've got so many people who think they know everything now. Okay, and so why get into that scrum? But there's always another project that's out there. But I love Nexstar. They are a powerful monster, and and I'm trying to aggregate their power and take it to the marketplace. The marketplace doesn't quite understand. I'm in the weeds here. Sorry, Rick. but they've got 215 television stations in 115 markets, and they've got News Nation and CW Sports, and the advertising community doesn't know how to accept them or buy them.
No, it's interesting. My former business partner, Rob Temple,
Yeah.
got Scripps to hire him. And Scripps, again, like Nexstar, owns a whole bunch of local affiliates, but they also owned Ion Television, and Ion was just reruns of primetime shows, and he got them in women's sports. He got them with a Friday night primetime WNBA window and a Saturday night primetime National Women's Soccer League window. And what it did was it changed their ability to talk to advertisers. It just got them in more rooms. And so I think your wisdom with Nexstar will be interesting to see. How do you get them in more rooms with some big ideas and some big programming, all that. So, hopefully that'll go well. And next season's version of Shaboom, I'll have you back and you can tell me about the last rodeo. And then I'll say, well, are you done? And you'll go, hell no, I'm not done. I mean, I'm still breathing. You're like me. You like to work. You like to do stuff. But you've had a marvelous career. The book is terrific. You're working on the second part of the book.
It's in here. I just got to sit down and type it out. Okay. Like, I mean, what it's like to write a book. I mean, it's everyone goes, I'm going to write a book. It's not that easy. Okay. And I talked to a friend, and again, I know we're running long, who said he was going to write this book. He was going to have AI do the whole thing. And I go, what's that about? So it's one thing.
I have enough artificial intelligence in here that I don't need it somewhere else.
No, Rick, you have authentic intelligence.
Well, thank you.
Authentic.
Well, it'll be fun. Listen, I can't thank you enough. 2 weeks in a row. It's been a lot of fun, and I appreciate you being with us on Shaboom. It's now time to take a trip down memory lane. One of my favorite Broadway plays is the play West Side Story. West Side Story came around at a time in the 1950s when we were really battling prejudices. It's a great story of rivalries between two teenage gangs, the Jets and the Sharks, Italians versus Puerto Ricans. And it really is the 1950s version of Romeo and Juliet. It's the Romeo and Juliet story. Hey, classic story, right? Capulets versus the Montagues. What happens? What always happens? Young Puerto Rican girl falls in love with a young Italian boy. Of course, it ends tragically, just like Romeo and Juliet did. But it's a great, great story and a great play. They've done a revival of it many times. One of my favorite Broadway playwrights, songwriters, is a guy named Stephen Sondheim. And Stephen Sondheim, who went on to write Into the Woods and Company and Follies and so many unbelievable plays, he writes the lyrics in West Side Story to this great score by the great Leonard Bernstein. So it's a great trip down memory lane, and the song we'll play from that is the song A Place for Us. A Place for Us is a great story of longing to be accepted, longing for two groups that hate one another for no other reason than they're from different nationalities. And we've seen this, throughout history, where we hate people for no other reason than they're different than us. And this song, A Place for Us, really sums up the feelings that we have that there is a better place if we'll be better people. It's now time for the boom. I'm rereading a great book by Joyce Kearns Goodwin about Abraham Lincoln called A Team of Rivals. I'd read it once before. I'm rereading it again. Politically, where we are right now, I thought it was time to go back and read it. Lincoln was so sure of himself that he surrounded him with people that had differing opinions. What a concept. What a concept to be so sure of your beliefs that you're willing to stop and listen to differing opinions. Because Jimmy Buffett recorded another song once upon a time called Mañana. And the tagline for Mañana goes, just remember, you might end up being wrong. You know, a lot of people think that changing your mind is flip-flopping. I think changing your mind just shows maturity. You get a different set of information and you make a different decision about that. Don't you remember when you only ate chocolate ice cream and now you eat butter pecan? Does that make you a flip-flopper? I don't think so. I need our politicians to start listening to each other's differing opinion, and that's the boom. Hey, the song of the week is kind of about rivals in an interesting way. So much popular music has had songs about a man loving a woman who loves someone else, and that longing. Our song today is a classic song by the Mills Brothers called I'll Be Around. I'll Be Around says, I know you love this other man, but I don't think he loves you, and I'm going to stay right here, right close, and when you need me, I'll be around. It's time to get back on the road with Rick. I told you recently that we were doing this interesting project called United Taste of America. And we went to the state of Pennsylvania and we decided to talk about two rivals. There are two restaurants literally across the street from one another in South Philly, and all they make are cheesesteaks. That's all they make. One of them has been there since the 1920s. It's called Pat's. And one of them has been there since the 1960s, and it's called Geno's. They're both open 24 hours a day. They both make incredible but different cheesesteaks. One chops the cheesesteak, one keeps it this way. They have different kinds of breads. They both use Spanish onions. They both have a choice of cheeses. Everybody thinks Philly cheesesteaks is Cheese Whiz. It can be canned Cheese Whiz, but it can be provolone, or it can be American cheddar, or it can be, another cheese that they're out doing today. But they're very, very different. But later on in United Taste, we went to Jersey Mike's. Now, we focused not on a cheesesteak, but on Jersey Mike's famous Italian sub, which they made their name from. But they did make me a Jersey Mike's cheesesteak that day for breakfast, and I ate it all, and it's pretty darn good. So if you can't get to Philly, get to Jersey Mike's and order yourself a cheesesteak on the road with Rick. It's time for the wine and wine. Hey, it's summertime, and in the summertime, you drink rosés. You drink rosés, and it's gotten to be interesting because it used to be you only drank French rosés. I mean, there was no other rosé than French rosés because they were the best. Ooh, not so fast. Suddenly, there are amazing Spanish rosés. Suddenly, there are amazing Italian rosés. And God forbid, suddenly, there are amazing American rosés. So, what do? I buy all four. And that's a pretty good picnic. What's my wine? I go to a lot of picnics at concert venues like Chastain Park in Atlanta or Lakewood, different places. And this is my wine. People were there to hear the music. You're not there to hear you talk. Eat your food, have fun with your friends, but when the music starts, be courteous to the artist and shut up so that the rest of us can hear the songs. And that's my whine today. It's time for the last word. One of my favorite people on the planet is the former Duke basketball coach, Mike Krzyzewski. He's just absolutely one of the he's one of the best basketball coaches ever. He's one of the finest human beings I know. He's done so much for the V Foundation for Cancer Research and for other things. He was our Olympic team coach and reestablished our dominance as the gold medal winning team. He's just a great guy. And here's what he says about rivalries. Great rivalries don't have to be built upon hatred. They're built on respect for excellence. Hey, rivalries are fun, but let's remember to respect the rival. We'll see you next week on Shabbat.